So, UFC Fight Night, Alexa Grasso versus Valentina Shevchenko 2 just happened last night, and it was a pretty eventful card, Some fights were good, some fights were bad, some fights were boring, some were entertaining. The main event ended in a draw, which, for a title fight is kind of uneventful, and you never want a title fight to end in a draw just because it holds up the division and there's no clear winner. But Alexa Grasso did retain the belt, technically, and she's still the champion, so we'll have to see what goes on for Valentina Shevchenko now. People are talking about a rematch. I don't know. I think there's clear contenders in that division, such as Erin Blanchfield, but I'm not the matchmaker. So, anyways, we'll go down and talk about all the individual fights. The first fight on the card was Josephine Knudsen versus Marnik Mann. It wasn't the most eventful fight. It was a pretty one-sided win for Knudsen. She's undefeated, comes out of Hansa Chimaev's gym. She's Swedish, so keep your eye on her. The next fight up the card was Alex Reyes versus Charlie Campbell. Now, I predicted this fight to be a first-round knockout win for Charlie Campbell, and it was a first-round knockout win for Charlie Campbell. He went out there, he imposed his will on Alex Reyes. It looked like it was a matter of time before he landed that shot. He had his timing down. He looked like he was confident in his hands. Alex Reyes looked stiff. He looked 36. He looked like he was coming off a 6-year layoff. He looked like he didn't know what he was doing in there, and he got knocked out in the first round. I don't know why people were picking Alex Reyes to come in there and beat a guy who's been fighting actively, who's been fighting consistently. Alex Reyes has been plagued with injuries, so he hasn't been healthy. He probably hasn't been training as consistently as you want someone to be. And then he also hasn't fought in 6 years. He's past his prime. He's 36 years old. Doesn't even have that many fights. He's had less than 20 fights. It's not like he's some experienced vet either. And he was coming off a knockout loss. He was coming off a knockout loss to prime Mike Perry. So I don't even think it was that. It's not that it's a bad loss. It's just that he is coming off a knockout loss and hasn't fought in 6 years since it. I don't know why people were picking him. But anyways, yeah, Charlie Campbell knocked him out in the first round. Not much to say, Did what he had to do. I think it was a great win. Not a great win, but I think it was a great performance for his UFC debut. What are you supposed to do when you get a guy who's not that good? Knock him out in the first round and make it look easy, and that's what he did. So the next fight was Tracy Cortez versus Jasmine Jasudavicius, and this fight, I thought this fight was pretty entertaining. Towards the end, they were yeah, come on, let's throw around, let's brawl, and I thought it was entertaining. I thought it was a pretty good, fun fight, and Tracy Cortez won in the end. I thought it was clear enough. When they were reading out the decisions, Jasmine looked like she knew she lost, and it was a unanimous decision for Tracy Cortez, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, that was a pretty fun one. I think that was one of the more exciting fights out of the first few, besides the first round knockout of Reyes, obviously. And then the next fight up the card was Edgar Chairez versus Daniel Da Silva. Now, this was an interesting one because of the stoppage. It was kind of weird. The stoppage was kind of weird, where it was similar to Askren Lawler, where he was in the choke and it was really tight, and the guy was cranking on it. It was really tight. Chairez was cranking. He was cranking on that shit, and it looked like Da Silva was either going out or out already. You know what I mean? He wasn't defending the choke. He was sitting there waiting to go out. He wasn't gonna tap, but he was gonna go out. He was choosing to go out in a shield, and then the ref looks at his arm. His arm is limp, and the ref, I don't remember if the ref picked his arm up when they did in Lawler Askren, and then it dropped again. But the ref, they showed the angle the ref was looking from, and the arm was limp, so it was a no contest. It got overturned because the stoppage was pretty bad. And yeah, other than that, it wasn't the most crazy fight. It was just pretty average, run-of-the-mill fight before that. But that means Daniel Da Silva has yet to get a win in the UFC, and even though they re-signed him. So I don't know what's next for him, or Chairez, really. Roman Kopylov versus Josh Fremd was the next fight on the card, and yeah, that was a pretty exciting fight. I thought that was just a statement, from Kopylov. It was just, he went out there and posed his will. He was piecing up Josh Fremd, piecing him up, landing hard body kicks, and he was just stuffing the takedowns. And even when Fremd was in on takedowns against the cage, he was still able to shuck him off. And then towards the end there, when Craig started, when Fremd started to shoot out of desperation. It was just like shucking him off. Like there was one where he shot and then he just literally to the side, threw him to the side, and Fred didn't even come close because he got the confident in his takedown defense, and he made Friend less confident in his takedowns. And then in round 2, he caught him with a mean body shot right towards the end of round 2, and it just crippled Friend. And it was just a statement, you know. He put a beating on Friend, put a bunch of damage on him. You know, he had him hurt more than once. And I think that it's just a really good statement win for Roman Kopylov. And I think that the next fight that he should get is a matchup with Mikhail Olasechuk. I don't really know how you say his name. I'm not that good at it. I'm not that good at pronouncing some of these names, but I think that would be a good fight for him. He's not in the top 15. He's coming off a good win though over another hard name to pronounce, but he's coming off a good win over Chidi Njokuani, which was a TKO win, which was an impressive win. He pulled through, and I think that would be a good fight. And maybe some people would say like, oh, that's too big of a jump for Kopylov, which is fair. You know, you could argue that that's true. So then I think you could give him another fight. You could give him is Marc-Andre Barriot, who fought on that card, the Canada card. You could give him. You know, but I think that a good matchup for him would be Mikhail Olasechuk, because they're both strikers. You know what I mean? And then they're both strikers, and then it's going to be an entertaining fight. I think that it'd be a good fight for him to get, and then get a crack at the rankings. Or he's on a bit of a tear though, so you could argue give him someone closer to the rankings, like a Andre Petroski or something like that, or maybe match him up with Joe Pyfer. That could be fun. Both the guys outside the rankings, or even if you want to give him someone in the rank, give him a Chris Curtis. You know. But anyways, I don't know if he deserves a fighter in the rankings though. When there's a guy like Kyle Borralho who's not in the rankings, who I think is on a better tear than Kopylov, and and hasn't lost in the UFC. So I think you should give him someone outside the rankings and around. Like, there is no official rankings for outside the top 15 really, but somewhere around the situation of Olasechuk, who's not on like a super tear, but he does have a good win. He's coming off a decent win, and or maybe like an Andre Petroski, or even like a Bruno Ferreira. You know, like someone just outside the top 15, but who has proven themselves as legitimate. Maybe not Ferreira, since he's coming off a loss, but someone like that. You know, I think Petroski could be even a good matchup too, because he's on a win streak as well, but we'll have to see how things go out. Now, the next fight was Lupi Godinez versus Ellis Reed, and this was a very, very entertaining fight from Lupi. She went out there, imposed her will. You know, she looked really good, floored her with a left hook. You don't really see a lot of knockdowns like that in WMMA, where they floor them. You know, they send them flying like that. Like it was a really solid knockdown. And after the knockdown, she picked her up, slammed her into the mat. You know, she was really beating the crap out of Ellis Reed, and made it a dominant victory. You know, she did what she had to do, and it was an impressive win. The next fight up the card was on the first fight on the main, which was Fernando Padilla versus Kyle Nelson. That fight was a pretty good fight. It was, it was pretty entertaining. I think that Padilla could have done a little bit more, but what can you do? You know, he was in his backyard. I think he could have maybe tried a little harder, pushed a little more of a pace, but it wasn't a boring fight. I'm not going to sit here and say that it was boring. I thought it was pretty entertaining. And then the next fight was Daniel Zellhuber versus Christos Giagos, and this was an entertaining fight. I was excited for this one because I like Giagos. He's good, and Zellhuber ended up getting the sub, and it was an impressive sub. You know, he was eating some shots early on, but he weathered, and he was able to eat the shots and get the sub. He found the finish, and not much else to say. Now, next up is Raul Rosas Jr. versus Terrence Mitchell. Now, this was probably the most impressive win on the card, just because it was just instant knockout. You know, like it was so dominant. Like, came out there coming off a loss. You know, people were. I'd say I picked him round one sub. I picked him to win by round one sub. I didn't pick him to win by round one knockout. Not even a minute in, and it was just a very impressive win. You know, there's not much else to say. You know, I think that he went out there and showed that he's been working on his striking. Stepped in on the shots and just floored him. Absolutely floored him, stiffed him. And then the ground and pound was really good ground and pound. It was that ferocious ground and pound looking for the finish when he hurt him bad. You know, and I think that now that he's bounced back from that loss, you can give him someone, someone outside the rankings, someone who's not on a tear, but someone who's decent. You know what I mean? Like, I'm trying to think who they could give Raul Rosas Jr. He is coming off that loss, so I'm thinking you could probably give him someone like maybe like a Brady Heistand or something like that. If you really, what you could do, which I think would be interesting, is actually no, I don't think he's ready for that. I was gonna say maybe give him to Cameron Simon, but I think that Cameron Simon's better than him. Actually, you know what? No, I think they both just finished Terrence Mitchell in the first round. They're both young. They're both grapplers. Why not make an exciting matchup between these two young guys? I mean, I know Raul Rosas Jr. is the youngest guy in the UFC, so he's going to be like, Cameron Simon isn't going to look young compared to him, but Cameron Simon is still young. He's very young. I don't know how old he is exactly. I think he's like 23. He's really young, and he's really good as well. He trains with Dricus du Plessis. He got a couple wins together in the UFC, so I think that would be the fight to make after this one would be, Cameron Simon versus Raul Rosas Jr. Now, the next fight up the card was the co-main event, Kevin Holland versus Jack Della Maddalena. And here's the thing, guys. I'm sure I sound like Sean Strickland, but I thought that this fight was a bit like I'm not going to sit here and say that it was a boring fight. It wasn't a boring fight. It was entertaining, but I don't know. I thought that both guys could have pushed it a little more so Holland. I think that it was Holland who wasn't pushing the pace as much as he could have. I thought that he could have just threw a little more and been a little more aggressive, took a little more risks. But it is what it is. I thought that the fight was still entertaining. If you look at the stats here, Kevin Holland did outstrike Jack, but he was very much less accurate. Like, he threw almost 400 strikes, and then Jack threw less than 200. So he did outland Jack, but he was much less accurate. I thought Holland won round 2. I thought he won round 2. I thought Maddalena won rounds 1 and 3, and I thought it was a close fight. So I don't see why there's so much controversy over the fact that it was a split decision, because I thought that I can agree. I don't think that Holland did enough to win, so I think that I'm pretty sure JDM could have comfortably won that one unanimously. But I thought that it wouldn't have been a 30-27. I think it would have been a 29-28, because I think that Holland did win round 2. I don't know why people are so convinced that he won. That he won all 3 rounds. I don't think he did. I think he won rounds 1 and 3, but I think he lost round 2, and I think it was 29-28. Maddalena was the score, and it was a good fight. Jack showed that he has underrated. This fight, not underrated, but that his fight IQ isn't bad. Like, he was technically very, very sound, and so was Kevin. So that's kind of why it ended up being not an absolute banger, because both guys were so technically sound, and they didn't want to take too many risks. But gives Jack Della Maddalena yet another win. I think that's a 6-fight UFC win streak, and you could look up the rankings. I think he's going to be number 13 now, so you could give him Neil Magny, but I don't think that's a very exciting fight. I think a more exciting fight would be Vicente Luque, right into the top 10. I know Vicente Luque is kind of washed, so it would kind of be a free win, but I don't know. I feel like I don't know if he's ready for Jeff Neal yet, who's number 8. That's a pretty big jump, five places up the rankings to number 8. But I think that would be a very exciting fight. Like, I think that if Jack Della Maddalena wins another fight and Jeff Neal still hasn't fought and he's still number 8, JDM's going to be what? Maybe 11, maybe 10 if he's lucky. And so that's not a super unreasonable jump. 11 to 8. It's cracking the top 10 pretty normal jump into the top 10. So I think that if JDM wins one more, I don't know who he should fight next besides like a Neil Magny or a Luque or something like that, because other than that, that's only people besides Ian Gary who are above him in the rankings. I don't think they're going to give Ian Gary, a guy like him. I just don't think they're going to do that. I think they're going to try and push Ian Gary up the rankings to a Stephen Thompson or a Jeff Neal or something like that, because I don't know about that, but the top 5 is looking kind of Burns, Chimaev, Muhammad, Covington, Usman. Like, that's a murderer's row of a top 5. Rachmanov number 7, Rachmanov number 6, Thompson number 7. Yeah, that division's very stacked. So I feel like once these guys like JDM and Ian Gary start cracking the top 10, that's when it's going to get really hairy, and that's when it's going to be sink or swim, you know. But anyways, JDM, yeah, Jeff Neal would be a great fight. I think it's a bit too early though. I think he needs another one like a Vincente Luque or a Neil Magny for the next fight. Now we're going to talk about the main event. Now I personally thought that this fight was a good fight. You know what I mean? I thought it was a good fight. For the draw, I personally think that Grasso did enough to win. I think it was 2-2 going into the 5th, and I think that she did enough to win the 5th round. Now, I don't think that the 5th round was a 10-8 round. I don't think it was. And that's part of why that's part of why it was a draw, and I don't think it was a draw. It was a close fight, but I think that Grasso won 3 rounds versus Shevchenko's 2. You know, personally, I do. And you know, it just sucks that it was a draw, because now there's always going to be that asterisk next to this fight that it didn't end the way that people hoped it would, either if you're a Shevchenko fan or you're a Grasso fan. Like, if you wanted someone to win, at least, and unfortunately it ended up in a draw. So what's next for the division is, I think that Grasso should take a bit of time off, because she just went 5 rounds, but she didn't take that much damage, so I think not too much time off, but like, take some time off. You know, she is the champ. She can take some time off if she wants to. And then I think she should fight Erin Blanchfield. I think Erin Blanchfield's the number 1 contender, and in that division, I think her win over Santos was more impressive than Fiora's win over Rose. Just personally, I think it was more impressive. Not that Rose looked bad, not that Fiora looked bad. I just think that it was more impressive for Erin Blanchfield to go up against a fighter like Santos, who is a bit of a harder matchup for her. And you know, she faced some adversity, but she showed that she has that grit and that heart, and she's able to pull wins out if she needs to. You know, she made it ugly, and she won the fight, and I think that makes her the number 1 contender. She's on quite the run, and her versus Grasso is the fight to make. I think that that's going to be a great fight. But yeah, I think overall the card was good. It was a pretty entertaining card, despite some of the fights being a little boring and some of the judging and the reffing being a little bit iffy, but at the end of the day, that's kind of what you expect, unfortunately, at a UFC event, is a bit of some shitty reffing and a bit of shitty judging, and a bit of cheating. Like, even DC said it. If you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. DC said, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying in the UFC, and that's true, you know, because they get away with it now. The refs don't really care, and that's just how it is. And if it's not the refs, it's the judges that seem to be retarded. But that's all for today. I'll probably make another video this week, and then I'll do the breakdowns and predictions for the upcoming fight night on next Saturday. But yeah, that's all for now, guys.